Hello, this lesson is on 7-3 and this begins on page 111. So the first thing we're going to do is we want to solve quadratic equations by factoring. So let's go ahead and read this sentence. To solve a quadratic equation ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 by factoring, the equation must be in factored form to use the zero product property. So what it says is that the zero product property states that if a times b equals 0, then either a equals 0 or b is equal to 0. Alright, and the first thing we want to do is begin by factoring, and then we're going to see what do we mean by the zero product property. Alright, so to begin to factor this, first thing you want to look at is, do these have any common factors? 3, negative 17, and 10. No. So we cannot take anything out at the very beginning. So let's go ahead and begin by using the box method. Now what you want to do is you always want to put the term that has x squared in the top left corner of the box, so 3x squared, and you want to put your constant in the bottom right corner. Now there's two methods that you can use in order to factor this. The one that we're mainly using here is the box method, but there's also grouping that you can use. So no matter what method you use, you still have to do the very first thing, which is to multiply the coefficient of x squared times the constant. So 3 times 10 gives me 30. And you want to find the factors of 30 that add up to give you the coefficient of x. Alright, so let's go ahead and find the factors of 30. The easiest ones are 1 and 30, but then you also have 2 and 15, 3 times 10, and 5 times, let's see, 5 times 6. Alright. Now, when we add these together, all of these, we get 31, 17, 13, and 11. Now, the one that comes closest is going to be 2 and 15. But notice it equals positive 17. And in this case, we're looking for a sum that gives us negative 17. And so what do we have to do here in order to get a sum of negative 17? Well, that means what we need to do is we actually need to make both of them negative. Because negative 2 minus 15 does in fact give me negative 17. But you always want to make sure, are these still factors that multiply to give me positive 30? Negative 2 times negative 15 does in fact still give me positive 30. So it works out. So that means that I can go ahead and put negative 2x in either of these boxes. Doesn't matter which one, so I'll go and put it there. And then negative 15x goes right there. Okay. Now, using the box method, I also want to show you the grouping method side by side. So that's what you would do for the box method. The grouping method, you would do this, grouping, and then this is the box. So grouping method, once you find your two factors, you can put negative 2x minus 15x plus 10. And so it doesn't matter which number you put first. You could have put negative 15x minus 2x plus 10. It doesn't matter which way you do it. Now, what we want to do in the box method is first you want to find the dimensions of this box right here. Important. So 3x squared can be broken up into x and 3x. But where am I going to put the 3x and the x? It's actually very important in this case. And again, to figure that out is you have to take a look at the first row. In the first row we have 3x squared minus 15x, and you want to see what can you take out from both of those two expressions. And remember, factoring, what you can do is just break it down to its components. 3x squared is basically 3 times x, and then negative 15x is basically negative 1 times 3 times 5 times x. What do these both have in common? They both have a 3 and they both have an x. And so that is what is going to be taken out. 3x goes right here, and then that means that x must go right there. Excellent. So we don't need this anymore. And now the rest is actually very simple. So 3x times what here is going to give me negative 15x. Well, it obviously has to be negative 5. 3x times negative 5 gives me negative 15x. And what about here? X times what gives me negative 2x? Well, it's going to have to be negative 2. Negative 2 times x gives me negative 2x. And we always want to check this. Negative 2 times negative 5 does in fact give me positive 10. And so those are my two factors. That means that 3x squared minus 17x plus 10 can be written as 3x minus 2 and x minus 5 equals 0. There we go. Now what about grouping? Let's take a look here. Remember, grouping, you're going to group the first two terms and then this last two terms together. And in between those two parentheses, there's a plus sign. Now, the grouping method, you want to look at your first parentheses and take a look at what can you take out from both of these. Now, 3 and negative 2 have nothing in common, so the only thing they have in common is going to be x. That means inside my parentheses I'm going to have 3x minus 2. Because when I distribute it back, x times 3x gives me 3x squared, and then x times negative 2 gives me negative 2x. Alright. Now, what about my second parentheses? What can I take out from both of these? Well, it seems that I can take out a 3, a 5. I can take out a 5. So, if I take out a 5, I'm going to have 3x here plus 2. And when I distribute it back, well, this is negative 3x. When I distribute it back, I get negative 5 times negative 3x, which is negative 15x, and then 5 times 2 gives me 10. Alright, so I distributed correctly. But now take a look at this. Are these parentheses exactly the same? No. That means I cannot continue with the next step until they are exactly the same. So notice that this is 3x minus 2 and this is negative 3x plus 2. So what can I do to fix this? Well, here's the trick. Instead of taking out a positive 5, what if I take out a negative 5? That means whatever's left inside my parentheses has to be 3x plus 2. Because when I distribute the negative 5, we get negative 5 times 3x, which gives me negative 15x, and then negative 5 times for negative 2 has to be positive 10. So this does work out when I distribute it. Now, do I have the same parentheses? Yes, exactly the same. So that means that 3x minus 2 is going to be in my first parentheses. These combine to become 1. And my second parentheses is basically what is left outside, which is x minus 5 equals 0. There we go. So box method and grouping method, those are two different methods, but they still give you the same answer. Alright, so now what do we do once we factored it out? So this is where the zero product property comes in. What you need to do is actually very simple. You're going to take each of the parentheses, whatever's inside the parentheses. So we're going to take 3x minus 2 and set it equal to 0. Or we're going to take x minus 5, the second parentheses, and also set it equal to 0. So that's basically what you do. And now the next thing we need to do here is just solve for x. Going all the way back to algebra 1, solve for x. So what we do here in the first one is to add 2 to both sides. So we got 3x is equal to 2. Divide both sides by 3. And we get that x is equal to 2 over 3. Here's my first solution. The next parentheses, all I have to do is add 5 to both sides. And so what I get is x equals 5. Here's my second solution. Okay, so do you see how we use the zero product property? We basically take each of the factors and set them equal to 0. And so I took each of these factors and I set them equal to 0 and then just solve for x. Now what do these two solutions mean exactly? Well, let's go all the way back to my original equation, which is 3x squared minus 17x plus 10 equals 0. 3x squared minus 17x plus 10 equals 0. And what these solutions basically mean, that if I go ahead and plug them in for x, they should exactly give me, they should exactly equal 0. So in this case, we can use either 2 over 3, or we could use 5. So let me leave these blank. So here's the moment of truth. When I plug in 2 over 3 in for x, is it going to give me 0? And if I plug in 5 in for x, is it also going to give me 0? So we have to check to see if this is actually true and see if the math actually works. Okay. So I can go ahead and just write the equation out. I'm going to test 2 over 3 first. Minus 17 times 2 divided by 3 plus 10. Here we go. Yes, it does in fact equal 0. Excellent. Now let's just go ahead and check our other solution where we just have 5. So when I press enter, this should give me 0 as well. It does. And so can you see that from beginning from lesson 7-2, using factoring, basically the purpose of factoring is to help us solve the equation. So we can use, so here's what we did. We took a quadratic equation and we factored it, And once we factored it, we were able to use the zero product property to find the solution. So we basically found two solutions, and that is this is basically why we have the box method and the grouping method, in order to enable us to factor a quadratic equation and to solve it in the very end. And so those are my two solutions right here for the question for this quadratic equation. Alright, excellent. And how do you know if you have the correct solutions? Well, you just basically plug them in to the original equation for each one and see if it actually works out. Okay, so you can have some more practice by doing the same thing with these. Just a little hint here. First thing you want to do is start with the standard form of the quadratic equation. So this is not in standard form. To get it into standard form, you basically have to add 8 to both sides, and so you get x squared plus 6x plus 8 equals 0. Here's the standard form. And so now you can go ahead and continue factoring that. Might as well finish this one with you guys. So if this is going to go inside here, this is going to go right there. You want to multiply the coefficient of x squared times the constant, which is going to be 8. What are the factors of 8 that add up to give me 6? Well, this is easy. It's going to be 2 and 4. So 2x and 4x. I need to find the dimensions of this box. It's x squared, so it's going to be x times x. So x times 4 gives me 4x squared, and then x times 2 gives me 2x. And that's it. Those are my two parentheses, x plus 4 and x plus 2 equals 0. So this becomes this. Now we go ahead and use the zero product property, which is basically taking each factor, x plus 4 equals 0, and then x plus 2 equals 0. So we took each of these two factors, set them equal to 0, and then we just need to solve for x. And what we get is we need to subtract 4 here, and we need to subtract 2 here. And our two solutions are x equals to negative 4 and x equals negative 2. Those are two solutions, and we found that by factoring. And all we have to do now is take your original equation, x squared plus 6x equals negative 8, and plug them into the original equation. So negative 4 squared plus 6x plus 6 times negative 4. What is that going to equal to? And then negative 2 squared plus 6 times negative 2 are both of those going to give me negative 8. So the moment of truth to see if the math works out. For negative 4 squared is 16 minus 24. That in fact does equal to negative 8. 4 minus 8 minus 12, I believe. No, minus 12. That does equal to negative 8. And so yes, they both work out. Excellent. Okay. So here's the standard form of the quadratic equation, which is basically ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, and where a cannot equal to 0. Now what we want to do here is do the last learning target. Create quadratic equations from solutions. So let's take a look at this right here. Example B. Write a quadratic equation in standard form with solutions x equals 4 and x equals negative 5. So what are we doing here? Notice that it already gives us the solutions, and we're working what we're doing here instead. So we're actually beginning with the solutions, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to work our way backwards to find the quadratic equation. That's basically it, working our way backwards. And so what we need to do here is first set each solution equal to 0. How am I going to do that? Well, here I need to subtract 4 from both sides, and so I get x minus 4 equals 0. Here I need to add 5 to both sides, and what I get is x plus 5 equals 0. So these are my two factors, and this is basically what goes. Now here's where I can use my box: x negative 4 and x and positive 5. So notice how, since I set them equal to 0, these are going to be my two parentheses, my two factors. And remember, those two factors basically are the dimensions of the outside of my box. And so now everything else is actually very simple. X times x gives me x squared. X times negative 4 gives me negative 4x. X times 5 gives me 5x. And negative 4 times 5 gives me negative 20. Now I can go ahead and write this out into my equation. X squared minus 4x plus 5x minus 20 equals 0. Final thing I want to do is just combine like terms. So x squared negative 4x plus 5x gives me x minus 20 equals 0. There we go. So from my two solutions, I worked backwards and I found my quadratic equation. So that's the quadratic equation written in standard form. I believe there was another example. Let's do this example. D. Okay, so again, it gives us the two solutions already, and what we want to do is take each solution and make them equal to 0. So how do I do that with this? First thing you want to do is get rid of the fraction. So in order to get rid of the fraction, I need to multiply both sides by 2. So when I do that, I get 2x equals negative 3. And then to make it equal to 0, I just need to add 3 to both sides. And so I get 2x plus 3 equals 0. And there we go. That is going to be one of my factors. So I can go ahead and put 2x there and then 3. Same thing with the x equals 5 over 2. I want to get rid of the fraction, so I need to multiply both sides by 2. So we get 2x equals 5. Now simply I just need to subtract both sides by negative 5, and I get 2x minus 5 equals 0, and there's my other factor right there. And this is going to go right here. And the rest is just very easy. So 2x times 2x gives me 4x squared. 2x times 3 gives me 6x. Negative 5 times 2x gives me negative 10x. And negative 5 times 3 gives me negative 15. Alright, so we just go ahead and write out my areas. Set it equal to 0, combine like terms, so we got 4x squared 4x minus 10x is basically negative 4x minus 15 equals 0. Here is my quadratic equation in standard form. So from my two solutions, I was able to work backwards and find the quadratic equation. Alright, so just to summarize what we did during this lesson, first thing we wanted to do is take our quadratic equation and find the two solutions by using factoring. And then we wanted to do it backwards. We started with two solutions and find what the quadratic equation is. That's basically what lesson 7-3 is all about. Alright, thank you for watching.